framework from idea to impact. So thrilled to have you up here. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Liz. I'm here for Collins Aerospace today, but I'm also here for the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance. And since our esteemed director, Mark Sage, can't be here, I am dutifully sporting the signature Mark Sage red shoes. I've been in XR for a very long time, advanced visualization for a very long time, helping people with advanced visualization technologies for pretty much all of my career in some way, shape, or form. And during that time, I've had a lot of people come into my office or call me on Zoom or even reach out on LinkedIn and say, I'd like some time with you to ask you a very important question. This has been the hardest question that I've ever had, and it's a repeating question. How do you so consistently create things that people clamor for? And that question comes up a couple of times a year, and I always feel bad because I start going off on these different tangents, and then these poor people leave the calls, and I think they're more confused than when they came in as to what it is that I do to make these things work. So the reason that people ask that is because over the course of my career, the things that I have conceived of, have helped design, and have worked with phenomenal teams to help bring into the world, a couple of my colleagues are here today, have added more than $200 million to the bottom line of my company. That's like a floor value through these double-digit number of visualization applications. Things like, and I speak on this often, virtual prototype modeling. We've used it on over 500 designs. It averages about a 2,000% return on investment each and every single time we use it. Or something that we're not allowed to talk about in a lot of depth, but I am allowed to say it is a novel way of visualizing electronics designs. And that one's probably going to break the 7,000% return on investment mark just this year, just with the value that it's going to bring this year. Used on over 10,000 of our designs and saving the company hundreds of thousands of hours a year. And another one that I'll talk to here is a novel way of sharing expertise. And this is something that has allowed our people to reduce their learning curves on some of their key technical content from months to seconds. And it's used thousands of times a year. Everybody loves it. So we've done a lot of really phenomenal things in our group, and we've had a lot of out-of-the-park home runs, to use a baseball metaphor. So whenever people come into my office and they ask that question, how do you create things that people clamor for? What they've got in their head is that at some point I have an idea, and then there's an impactful outcome, and that the path from point A to point B is a straight line. They're not seeing a whole lot of challenge on my team's part, on my part either. The truth is, and anybody who's had effective innovations has probably experienced this, it actually looks more like that. But all too often, we also have, especially in the XR space, we also have something that looks a little bit more like that, where we have an innovation faceplant. So the question is, how can we have fewer innovation faceplants? And that's the framework that I'm going to be talking about today, and this is a framework that we're going to be publishing on the Area's website here in the coming months. So this framework, its foundation is human-centered design. And human-centered design has been around for a while, but a lot of people still don't know it. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about this. Human-centered design is the way that every tech product that you love was probably designed, whether they intended to use human-centered design approaches or not. It's probably how every tech product you love was designed. Has two phases. The first and absolutely most important phase is understanding the right problem. If you don't understand the right problem, you are only lucky if you design the right solution. So you understand the right problem, and then you design the right solution. And this two-phase approach, represented by two diamonds, has 4 steps. First step, the opening of the diamond, the divergence, is the discover step, where you're taking in as much information as you can. You're opening the aperture. And then the next side of that diamond, the divergence, is where you are coming in and you're kind of homing in on what the real problem is based off of all that information that you took in. You're doing those 5 whys that we hear about so much in enterprise. And then on the solution side, you are again opening the aperture towards all the possibilities that might be out there to solve this problem that you've homed in on. And then you close that aperture again and you create something and you bring it to the people, and the people are happy. Yeah, that's the way that human-centered design works. So the reason that this is really important, over there on the right side of the slide, is that requirements are not as important as the experience of what you deliver. And a key case of that is Quicken. When Quicken came to market, I think it's budgeting software. When Quicken came to market, there were 46 competitors in the market. They came to market with 30% of the capabilities of any of those 46 competitors. But that 30% was the key 30%, and it was well designed. And it quickly dominated the market. So that's most of the things that have worked from our team, they've worked because they're elegant, because they do the core things that people need to do, and they do it exceedingly well. So the framework, now that we've been through human-centered design, now that you have that understanding, we've got the idea, we've got the impact on the other side. How do we get from point A to point B? And this is the framework. And this is going to be a little bit intimidating, but it's going to become elegant as we go through this. So we know human-centered design starts the whole process off. If you do human-centered design, that informs what your users need in order to have a pleasant user experience. And a pleasant user experience is a very broadly defined thing, but in generic terms, it has 4 characteristics. It's easy, it's efficient, it's effective, it's simple, and it's satisfying. If you have a pleasant user experience, that enables but does not guarantee adoption and diffusion. And the reason that it doesn't guarantee it is because too often we look at the relative advantage piece. And by the way, that's a relative advantage from the user's perspective, not yours. But things like compatibility and complexity, compatibility being, how similar is this to my past experiences as a potential adopter? How well does this fit in with the norms of the culture that I work in? Those are things that are very often overlooked whenever we're thinking about new technologies that we're going to introduce into our enterprises. So taking those into account are equally as important. And then it's only through adoption and diffusion that you're able to have benefit and impact. And benefit and impact has a whole slew of ways that it manifests. The ones that we too often fixate on is ROI. There are many other ways that benefits are realized, and that's one of the things that hopefully will come through on this. So, like I said, this looks intimidating, but as you'll see, it's actually a pretty elegant way of innovating. So we're going to walk through an example. So the framework in action, this is a fictional example. It's fictional, but you're going to it'll probably sound pretty familiar to you, because even at this year's conference, this scenario that I'm going to walk through has been spoken of by several companies who have taken this stage. Now, we're going to assume this is kind of setting the stage. We've got a top-down innovation trigger. Could also be bottom-up. But we're going to say top-down just to make things a little bit easier, because top-down innovation triggers tend to come with money. Unfortunately, they also tend to come with a short attention span. We've got an executive who has come to us and said, hey, I've heard a lot of good things about this XR technology, in particular augmented reality work instructions. I hear about it doing really good things, some of those things for our competitors. I've got a little bit of a fear of missing out. And we've got some products that are struggling a little bit. And that executive comes to you and she says, hey, I'd really like you to figure out how we do augmented reality work instructions. Now, right off the bat, we've broken the rules a little bit because now we've got a technology that's looking for a solution. So the thing that we want to do and need to do as engineers is to figure out what problem needs to solve and whether or not that technology really is the right thing for that problem, whatever that problem happens to be that we're wanting to solve. That bottom-up innovation trigger, let me say something real quick about that. The nice thing about that is that because an executive, somebody, a stakeholder high up in the organization isn't thinking about, well, they're off working on this and how long is it going to take them to do it, you have a little bit more runway to be able to get something working. But the downside of that is that you got to figure out a way to do it cheaply, because you generally don't have a lot of money to be able to do that. So discover the piece that is the absolute most important piece of the overall innovation, successful innovation experience, and it is too often the one that is completely overlooked. So we're going to start here, and the first thing that we're going to do in Discover is that we're going to, observation is key. You want to be out there with the people. We heard that a lot the last couple of days. You want to be out there with the people, understanding what it is that the people need. But the question is, in a lot of our organizations, a lot of our enterprises, they're really big spaces. I can't be in one site and know what's going on in another site. So you got to choose where you're going to start. So your first thing that you're going to want to do is to select a place that is not niche. Because if you select a place that's got a niche PLM system, that's got a niche ERP system, that uses niche CAD data, you might have an out-of-the-park home run, but then you can't scale it anywhere because everything that you just did was for a niche place. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing that first time, it has the potential of growing, because whatever that site uses, it looks like what's available in other sites. So now that you've identified that key place, that place where you're going to do this, you're setting to observe and you're trying to learn. And there's all kinds of questions that you could ask in this phase. This is one of my favorite phases of innovation. For a lack of, like boring everybody with a ton of questions, I chose 6. And so the first one that I would say we would do here is that we would set to figure out what's easy about this product. And we're going to say that this product is about yay big, and it's got a large chassis. It's got several modular type things that get installed into it, and then there's these labyrinthine cable routings that snake throughout the whole thing. So that's what we learn about the product. And then the next one is the workspace. Well, it's kind of 2 pieces. They've got a workbench over here where they do a lot of the prep work, and they've got a lot of the parts, screws and stuff like that over here. And then a couple of feet away, they've got the product, and that's maybe built up on a pallet that's a wheeled pallet, because it's going to be heavy when it's done. So the work is kind of done in two separate spaces. What do people do in their work? Be very activity focused when you're doing this. You're not basing your judgments on what people say, you're basing your judgments on what people do. And the thing that you notice is that whenever they are working on the things that are like, we need to screw this together, we need to put this module here, they don't struggle with that so much. What they struggle with is those very spatially complex things. And whenever they have to do those spatially complex things, what they do is they've got this paper instructions that they grab, and because they can't see from where I'm at it with the palette over here, they can't read the work instructions. So they grab this paper binder and they bring it over to the thing, and they're flipping to the right page, and they're trying to understand what's going on there. So that's a key understanding. What's the workforce like? Who are your influencers? We oftentimes call these people early adopters. I don't like the term early adopters because it tends to get us thinking of the people who adopt things first. If the person who adopts something first is one of the least respected people on that team, you're no better towards getting adoption and diffusion. You need to find out who those early adopters are, who are the people that other people look to and that kind of move the needle for people who are respected. And the workforce in this case, we're going to say they're not the most tech savvy. It might be a little bit of an older workforce. They've never had a reason to wear head mount displays and things like that. So that's another thing that we need to think about. What's the technology and the support structure like? Really good DT presence on that site, and they've got good wireless, so everything looks there. And basically, you want to stay there and learn as much as you can for as long as you can, because the more you learn, the better your solution is going to be. I love this quote from the great Don Norman, author of Design for Everyday Things and several other really great books on design. Invariably, the problem that I am asked to solve is not the right problem. It's not the real fundamental problem. And that's the reason that you're doing this. So now we're going to speed up a little bit. In the discover phase, this is manageable. This isn't as complicated as it was before. We only have a few things that we need to be thinking about here. What works and what's slow, what is fast for people. So that's on the user experience side. Relative advantage. What do we have to displace if we're going to bring something in here and it's going to be successful? What is it going to take for an assembly operator to reach for whatever it is that we choose to bring in? We're not solution focused yet. Instead of that binder, if that's the thing that we're going to be targeting. And need is another one. It's of course, how often do these problems happen? How expensive are they when they happen? But it's also who's feeling the pain. Because if the person who you're hoping to adopt the technology is not the person who's feeling the pain, then what's in it for them to adopt the technology? You're going to have to set it as a requirement. And requirements only stick for as long as the person's in place who is making that requirement be there in the first place. So you want to make sure that the people who are feeling the pain are the ones who would be the ones to adopt. So now we're going to move on to define, where we're homing in. And in this stage, what we're doing is we came into this and we had a leader, a site leader, who told us, I think that we need more training. This is just a really hard product, and that's the problem, is that we need more training. Training is always the answer. But when you were out there observing things, like I said, you saw that most things were fine. It was these labyrinthine instructions that were needing people's attention. And when you sat down with the assembly operators and you asked them, if I could change one thing for you, improve one thing for you, what would that be? And the operators basically confirm your assumption, and they tell you, we'd love if we could burn that damn binder. So now you're starting to get some confirmation about some of the things that you learned, and now you're starting to think in terms of we need to augment the binder steps, and you work with those early adopters, and they tell you that they agree with that assumption. So the best understood problems make for the best designed solutions. Going back to the framework, it's starting to flesh out a little bit. Effective and efficient are making a little bit more sense to us. We've got a better understanding, even more so than we did before, and we're starting to get a sense of what these particular people would regard as simple in their workflows. The relative advantage is coming clear, but also you're getting a sense of what's compatible for them, what they would regard as complex. And one of my favorite pieces in this part of the phase is the feedback piece, because it's not uncommon to create mock-ups in this stage, to make hope real, so to speak. If we could do this, if this could be your alternative experience, what would you think? And just about at this exact hour, 1 week ago today, I was going through this on a factory digital twin project that we're working. And I got done with my demonstration of this fictional mock-up, this fictional factory digital twin capability. And the quote that's there for impact and value was the actual words. That was the first word spoken from the audience. Would I be able to use this? That's the exact type of response that you're looking for. If you have to ask people what they think, or if the response is kind of a polite acceptance, that's a glaring red flag, because it means that you haven't really hit the mark that you need, that the people need you to hit for them. So the beautiful thing about that is that you're getting a very early indication whether or not you're on the right path. And that's another really good strength of this approach. So now we move into the siren's call of innovation. This is where everybody likes to start, because this is the fun part. And the siren's call is a dangerous thing. And hopefully you do the understanding the right problem before you get to this, and don't start in this place. So now we're going to open that aperture based on everything that we just learned, and we're going to start looking at all possible ways that we might be able to do this. And in order to do this, what we choose to do is to find a technology provider who has a lot of experience with a lot of different modalities for doing augmentation, has a lot of love for the systems and experience with the systems that we have in our company, their PLM systems and things like that. They've got a good user experience, because if their user experience is bad out of the box, they can have these other things. It's almost table stakes. They can have these other things, and it's not going to really take with people, because they're going to need to be trained to use it. Like I said in one of the questions that got asked of this talk on Wovia, when was the last time that you installed an app on your phone that you needed to be trained for? You know, even Gaussian splatting apps on our phones have us going within minutes. So if you need to be trained, that's going to be one of the problems. And they're known for making really quick progress, because again, that executive's innovation clock is ticking away. And you need to show some progress. You need to show that you're making a difference in people's lives. So based on that, you bring that technology provider in, and you start dabbling with the different ways that you can solve this problem together. And you're bringing in those influencer early adopters. And as a result, you end up choosing a tablet. Because in this particular use case, a tablet will do the trick. And people are familiar with tablets. They understand what that usage paradigm is. They're open to the headsets, but they're like, let's get this working with a tablet first. And so that's the technology that you choose. Very often, there's a customization that needs to happen to the user experience. And anything that you do to customize the user experience, do usability studies on. Steve Krug's book, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It makes usability studies so tangible, so easy to pull off. And it's one of the most effective things that you can do in this stage. And you integrate with your system so that they will automatically switch to the augmented reality steps or modality whenever they're on those quote-unquote binder steps. They don't even have to click a button. It just automatically happens for them, because you're reducing friction from the user experience. And the most important part of this one for me is starting to harvest user stories. Because when people are getting their hands on things, that's when you start to hear what their actual thoughts are on them. And those user stories are the first sign of value that you're getting. It's qualitative, yes, but it's just as important as numbers are. And the reason for that is because too often there is the cynicism about the numbers. You can fudge the numbers, and figures lie and liars figure. I think we've all heard that. But when you have actual stories and actual feedback from actual users, people are more prone to believe those. It gives them context. So now user experience is fleshed out. You're starting to get a sense of what people feel is a satisfying experience versus unsatisfying. Trialability is a big one here. how much do I have to do in order, if I'm somebody walking past and I'm like, that looks awesome, I want to give that a try. What does it take for me to kick the tires? Do I have to sell a kidney to get licensing, to get things installed? Trialability is very important to adoption and diffusion. And then usage. It's a dereliction of duty to deploy a digital solution and not build analytics into it. It is a dereliction of duty. So from the very beginning, you need to be figuring out how you're going to measure these things and to put those things in place, because that executive needs to know that what she told you to do, you're doing, that it's working for people, that things are on the increase, that things haven't started to plateau or even started to drop off. And if they've started to drop off, have you gotten out there and figured out why? And now we're in the home stretch, deliver. And in the deliver phase, you notice I've got the word piloting here. We haven't talked about a proof of concept because the proof of concept happened in the last phase. We were proving whether or not it was feasible. In my world, there are 3 stages to innovation before go live. Proof of concept proves feasibility. Can I do it once? Piloting proves viability. Can I do it locally? Beta proves scalability. What does it take for me to do this across the entire company? And you can't know the answer to those 3 questions when you're way back in the beginning phases of this. You learn as you go with each one of these. So now we're starting to pilot. We're doing a real world stress test. And we are doing this through those influencers, through those early adopters. And the reason that we're doing that is because those people have been there. They're familiar with the solution, and very important, they are forgiving because they've got a stake in this game. They feel bought in. And the reason that forgiveness is so important is because there will be bugs. And when those bugs happen, they're going to need to be fixed. And if you don't have somebody who is involved and forgiving, they're going to go out there and start talking smack about your solution. And that's going to be hard to overcome. So you want to make sure that you've got those forgiving people involved in this process. And then you are present. You are not doing a launch and leave. Launch and leaves are bad ideas. You want to launch this thing, and you want to be right there beside those people so that you can continue harvesting those stories. So that if there is discontent, so let me come back to discontent in just a second. So that if there is somebody who is like really fired up about this, that person's golden. And the person who's discontent is golden too. The reason that the person who's discontent, I love naysayers. I actually have a framed picture in my office, a framed sticker that came from Zoomies, in my office that says, I heart haters. And the reason that I've got that is because those are the people who see the problems that are down the road, and if you are listening to them, paying attention to them, you're probably going to get insights to needs that you haven't thought about yet. So being present to pay attention to those things. And the reason I've got that quote there from William Zinsser is because writing a clear sentence is very much like innovation. It's iterative. You never get it right on the first draft, ever. You have to come back. You have to keep at it. You have to keep refining it. So now we are all fleshed out on the framework. By the time we get to discover, it hasn't been too difficult because each step of the way we did a little bit more in the process, and we are getting those metrics, and we're doing great things. And so if somebody was to come into my office today and say, and ask that hardest question, how do you so consistently create things people clamor for? What I would tell them is, well, the first thing you got to understand, by the way, these are some of my favorite books, and these are my actual books. You can see how well, especially the diffusion of innovations is worn on the sides. The other side of it's being held together by tape. the better you understand your problems, the better your solutions are going to be. And the reason for that is because human-centered design, it gives you what you need to know in order to, and it's an iterative process, in order to create solutions that meet people's needs and that are satisfying to those people. Those people. If you do this, it enables, but it does not promise uptake, because there's other things that factor into adoption and diffusion than just the user experience. But going through human-centered design, you get insight to what some of those other cultural things might be, what some of those personal things might be. And then uptake is a social process. It's a process of who do I trust? And if Mikey says it's good, I'm dating myself a little bit. We were talking about this at the story around the table this morning. If Mikey says it's good, then I'm going to trust that it's good. So it's a social process. And that's the reason you need to tag up with those influencer early adopters so early and build those relationships with them, because those are the people who are your early adopters. Those are the people who move the needle for the social systems that you're trying to innovate for. And then I think that this is the last one. Stories are absolutely essential. They are the things that fuel that adoption and diffusion and ultimately the impacts. Oh, no, there's one more. So impactful innovation is a continuous improvement process. You're continually working with it. If you've got a leader who thinks that this is going to be we launch it and we walk away, we launch it and it's either a success or a fail, you need to find another leader to be working with, plain and simple, because that's an unreasonable expectation. You think about every technology that we use, the first whatever, fill in the blank, was awful. ChatGPT hallucinated like crazy. And now I use it. I used it last night. I was out to dinner and I was like, I stepped on a stone 8 months ago and it still hurts on my heel. What's the problem? And it came back and told me what's probably the problem and said, go to a doctor. And I trust it because it's gotten to the point now where it's working well. So it's an iterative process. And we don't have time for questions. I hit zeros about a minute ago. So thank you to the folks for not kicking me off the stage. But I do want to point out that we are bringing this to the area's website here in the next, I don't know, I don't have a date from Mark yet, but I'm guessing it'll probably be the next 6 months or so. And this will be a highly interactive infographic. You'll be able to click through any one of these things and see more information about it in short video clips that will probably be pieces of this talk just repackaged. So thank you. I loved seeing all the people taking notes. That makes me feel good. and that's it. Thank you.